The door that didn't open. At dawn, Rosemary put the hoodie back on and walked to the 2020. The front door was boarded up. Yellow citation tape fluttered from the railing. Someone had spray painted CLO's ED across the plywood in letters the size of her head, and underneath, in smaller script, "Well, be back." She knocked anyway. She knocked for 5 minutes, then 10. She knew Luce was inside. She could see a light burning in the second-floor window, a shadow moving behind the curtain, but Luce didn't answer. Rosemary kept knocking until her knuckles ached, until the cold seeped through her coat, until the truth settled into her bones like a weight she would carry for a long time. The all-night conversation, the shared coffee at dawn, the tentative trust that had grown between them across a Telecaster and a head wound in a borrowed blanket, it was gone. Luce had said she would think about the contract, but Rosemary understood now, standing in the cold morning light with her knuckles raw, that Luce had already made her decision. The 2020 was closed, the scene was scattered, and whatever had been growing between Rosemary and the woman who'd built it, trust, friendship, the fragile beginning of something that might have been worth more than any contract, was broken. She turned away from the door. She walked back toward the hotel, toward whatever city management would send her to next. She had work to do. She had debts to pay. She had a mission to fulfill, even if the mission had begun to taste like ash in her mouth. She didn't look back. She couldn't. If she looked back, she would see the light in the second-floor window, and she already knew what it meant. Luce was up there. Luce had watched her from behind the glass. Luce had chosen not to answer, and Rosemary understood, with a clarity that cut deeper than Jonah's anger or management's cold protocol or any of the lies she'd told herself, that she had earned this. Every knock that went unanswered, every door that stayed closed, every person who walked away. She had come to Baltimore to find music, and she had found it. She had come to build a life, and she had built one briefly, beautifully, before tearing it down with her own hands. The bus station was quiet at this hour. She bought a ticket for the first route heading south. She didn't know where she was going yet. She only knew she couldn't stay here in the shadow of the 2020, waiting for a door that would never open again. Episode 4, Walk Away. I watched her from behind the curtain. Rosemary stood on the front steps of the 2020, knocking. 5 minutes, then 10. Her breath fogged in the cold, her knuckles reddening. I could see she knew she'd done something unforgivable and still hoped forgiveness might be possible. I'd already forgiven her. That was the problem. Somewhere around 4 in the morning, sitting on the kitchen floor with an empty whiskey bottle, I'd understood. She'd destroyed my venue because she was hungry for something she didn't know how to name. I recognized that hunger. I'd felt it myself at 15, standing in my parents' doorway with a backpack and a guitar. But forgiveness didn't mean I had to open the door. She turned away eventually, shoulders hunched. When she disappeared around the corner, I sat down on the floor. The 2020 was dead, built from a row house in a neighborhood nobody wanted, reinforced with salvage lumber, a sound system cobbled together from favors. I'd learned to patch drywall, sweet-talk the health inspector, build something that mattered. Now someone had spray-painted CLOSED across the plywood, and underneath, well, be back. I hadn't written that. One of the regulars must have. I picked up the Telecaster I'd played at the Peach the night everything changed. I didn't play anything for a while, just held it. Then I started writing. The song was about leaving, not the leaving it done at 15, walking away from a life with no room for who I was. This was different, staying long enough to build something, watching it fall, deciding whether to rebuild or walk. I called it Leaving Town, and when I sang it, I thought about Rosemary's face in the cold morning light. It was the best thing I'd written since the glow paint lyrics I'd left on a hotel wall the night the stadium burned. Daisy the Diesel Van. The van cost $4,000 from a man named Curtis near the harbor. Diesel, ugly, a boxy white cargo van with rusted wheel wells and a dented rear door. Head named it Daisy. I didn't ask why. Seen a lot of you folks lately, Curtis said. Everybody's heading out. Nothing left here to stay for. Baltimore still had music. Mary Hastings, the Handsome Mosquitoes, a dozen bands I'd booked. But the 2020 was closed, the scene scattered, and Curtis wasn't wrong. I loaded everything I owned, 2 guitars, the Marshall, clothes, books, Atlas, bike, a hard drive of unreleased songs. The furniture I left, the platinum record I left behind the bookshelf, the whiskey I finished, then I drove. The highways were different. Self-driving lanes marked with blue reflectors, monitored by drones. Other stretches just empty. I got pulled over twice in the first 100 miles for having Maryland plates where Maryland plates meant outsider. The second cop asked where I was headed. Pittsburgh. Got a show. The Pittsburgh show was in a Bloomfield basement. 40 people showed up, 39 more than expected. When I finished, a kid with a face tattoo handed me cash. "You're Harriet, right? From the video?" I wasn't the person the kid had named. That name was the alias Rosemary had wanted me to sign with a clean slate. But this kid had seen something online and decided I was someone else. "Sure," I said. "I'm Harriet." Out of order. Shed returned to the StageHoloLive campus because she didn't know where else to go. The company had booked her a dorm private, small, identical to the one from orientation, and Shed collapsed onto the bed, still wearing the hoodie she hadn't removed since Joni walked out of her hotel room. "You could have been one of us, but you didn't." Rosemary replayed the words until they lost meaning. Then she got up and walked. The campus was designed to be self-contained dorms, cafeteria, sound stages, everything within walking distance. Shed noticed during orientation but hadn't understood. Now she did. The campus wasn't convenience. It was quarantine. Recruiters weren't supposed to compare notes. Discover the guilt they carried was part of the design. The isolation kept them docile, kept them from asking questions that might lead to answers they didn't want. She found a footbridge at the property's edge, spanning a dried-up creek. A sign read "Outofforder," but the gate was unlocked. She stood in the middle, gripping the rusted railing, and kicked the metal until her toes throbbed. Shed been so stupid. Shed thought she was helping connecting musicians to an audience, offering something better than basements and constant fear of raids. Shed believed the language about access and opportunity because believing made her feel like her job mattered, like she was part of something bigger than a wind farm and a silent house. But the job didn't matter. The job was a weapon. StageHoloLive didn't want to share music. It wanted to own it, control it, eliminate every alternative until the only way to hear a live song was through a hoodie and a subscription. And she was the one holding the knife. Her hoodie pinged. "Management." The silver mask appeared. "Your Baltimore recruits have been processed. Josh D'Souza signed a solo contract this morning." His already in rehearsals. Rosemary's stomach dropped. Solo? He was in a band. The rhythm section declined to audition. The venue is no longer operational. The venue was no longer operational because SHL had shut it down. The rhythm section had declined because Aaron Randall had taught them what happened to bands who signed. And Josh, with his lumberyard job and his voice that could crack open a room, had signed anyway. "Alone, your next assignment is Asheville, North Carolina. Report within 72 hours. The mask vanished." Rosemary didn't pack. She opened her phone and navigated to an underground music site, one Joni had mentioned, requiring technical creativity to access. She found a listing for Luce's band under the same alias the uploaders had used, performing at a barn outside Knoxville. Password required. She bought the album. All 8 songs, her own money, not the company card. She listened to Blood and Diamonds 3 times, remembering the hospital, the IV, the song that had made her feel less alone. She couldn't undo what she'd done, but she could go to Asheville. She could do the job, and maybe find a way to do less damage. She deleted the apology shed, started writing to Joni. "I'm sorry I destroyed your community. I'm sorry I kissed you while working for the people erasing your world." None of it was enough. She started packing, and somewhere in the back of her mind, an idea was forming how a person might use the machine against itself, if she was clever enough, careful enough, and just a little bit reckless. The warehouse and the controlled burn. Asheville was beautiful and strange, a mountain town with a stubborn streak of independence. Rosemary rented a room above a convenience store shabbier than her Baltimore hotel, but with a window onto the Blue Ridge and a radiator that clanked reassuringly. She found a coffee shop called French Broad's Coffee and Books where the barista, a woman named Sadie with dyed blue hair, served oat milk lattes and didn't ask too many questions. She learned the names of street musicians: Nolan James on fiddle, Annika on keyboard, Lorian and Mercury Retrograde with banjo and ukulele. None were SHL material. None wanted to be. They directed her to a warehouse on the south side where a man named Tomas ran shows on Thursday nights. The warehouse was ugly yellow-brown brick, no windows, a single door with a hand-painted sign, SIMRATSTONIGHT. Rosemary paid $10 and stepped into a room of folding chairs and Christmas lights, and people who had clearly known each other for years. She felt the familiar panic rising, but she forced herself to breathe. She had left her hoodie's GPS spoofed to her apartment, her phone on her nightstand, her corporate identity somewhere it belonged. The Simrats were loud and messy and joyful. The crowd danced with the abandon of people not being watched, not being recorded, not being evaluated. Rosemary stood at the back and felt, for the first time since Baltimore, something like peace. And then she had an idea. It came during the second band set. The idea was terrible and dangerous and might get her arrested, but it might also work. She found Tomas after the show. "How worried are you about a raid?" "Always worried." "Why?" "What if I could make sure that if the police raided a show, it would happen somewhere you weren't?" He listened. When she finished, he was quiet. "That's either brilliant or insane. Probably both. I owe someone a debt. I can't pay it back, but I can pay it forward." The plan was simple. She found another warehouse, empty, abandoned, and filed paperwork listing it as an SHL event space. She sent management a report about a new venue, bands eager to audition. She submitted real video footage with metadata altered to point to the empty warehouse instead of Thomas's space. Then she waited. The raid came on a Saturday night. Rosemary was at Thomas's warehouse watching the Simrats' third set when her backup phone buzzed. Police activity at the Southside warehouse. Multiple arrests. She showed Sadie. Sadie's eyes went wide. "That's the other place. Nobody's there except maybe confused cops. Thomas is fine. The Simrats are fine." Sadie stared. "You did that on purpose." "That's a controlled burn," Sadie said. "You just did a controlled burn." The term was new to Rosemary, but the concept wasn't. Foresters used controlled burns to clear underbrush, prevent bigger fires. The empty warehouse was the underbrush. Thomas's venue was the forest. Something loosened in her chest. It wasn't absolution. She didn't deserve that. Not for Baltimore, not for Joni. But it was a start. A small act of sabotage, invisible to the people she was sabotaging, meaningful to the people she was protecting. She could build a career out of fake venues and scrambled metadata, sending shells enforcement machinery chasing ghosts while real music played on. That night, walking home through Asheville's cold streets, she was still a StageHoloLive recruiter, still bound by debt and contract. But she was also something else now. Something the company hadn't trained her for. She was a saboteur. 16 solo shows. Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Columbus, Toledo, Detroit, Ann Arbor, Chicago, Milwaukee, Madison, Minneapolis, Des Moines, Kansas City, Lawrence, Columbia, St. Preves. Luce. 16 shows in 5 months. Basements, living rooms, one garage where the drummer's mom made pierogies and the PA caught fire. I slept in the van, ate gas station sandwiches, wrote songs on the steering wheel. And somewhere around show 12, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Sometime between Indianapolis and Louisville, or that night in St. Louis when the power went out and I played acoustic by candlelight while the audience sang along. The anger had been there so long I'd stopped noticing it at JD for quitting, the label for dropping me, Rosemary for destroying the only home I'd built. But anger was heavy, and I was tired, and the songs wanted to be about something else. I needed those 16 solo shows in those months after the 2020 died, and they were a necessary intimacy. All those couches, all those new friends, all those people who felt good for having helped me make a connection down the road. It wouldn't have been the same if I'd had a band along. By the 16th show, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't itching for a beat beneath me. I wrote Manifest Independence at a rest stop outside Memphis. One sitting, words pouring out so fast I could barely keep up. When I finished, I sat with the engine off and the Mississippi glinting in the distance and cried for the first time since April died. We're still playing music in real life. Come find us. Ugh. Nashville. I found Silva in a bar on Nashville's east side. He walked in carrying a bass case and a grin like had been expecting me. The sound engineer from the Peach, the one Wad, read my tech writer, Wad, stepped in on bass when JD quit and the world was ending. He looked older now, but his hands were steady. I'm putting together a band, I told him after the show. Basements, barns, wherever will have us. I know a drummer. The drummer was Marcia Januari. Tall, dark-skinned, cornrows, a handshake that left my fingers tingling. When I took her hand, I felt recognition, not love at first sight, but the sense that whatever was about to happen was already in motion. She felt it too. Her eyes flickered, her grip tightened fractionally. Then she let go and sat behind the kit. We played 3 hours. My material, old covers, a blues progression Marcia suggested that became something new. The chemistry was immediate. Silva's bass anchoring my guitar, Marcia's drums pushing us forward. What are we calling this? Marcia asked. The name that kid in Pittsburgh gave me is already taken. Some kid in Pittsburgh decided I was someone else. Cassis Fire, like the ice cream, and also like a fire made of black currants. It doesn't have to make sense. Cassis Fire. Tasted right. We booked 3 Georgia shows and loaded into Daisy. The police stops got worse. Maryland plates attracted attention everywhere, but we learned which highways to avoid, which towns would welcome a band of strangers. We learned to sleep 3 in a cargo van, shower at truck stops, eat whatever the venue offered. And I learned to be a band leader again. Not the tired, resentful band leader from the Pink Hotel. 3 people who wanted to be there, wanted to push the music into places it hadn't gone. Graceland. The Memphis show fell apart before it started. The venue was dark and padlocked with a note. Cops came, don't stop, keep going. So we kept going, through empty streets, past shuttered barbecue joints. Around midnight, we found ourselves in Graceland's parking lot. A security drone circled overhead, camera light blinking red. I should have driven away, but I was tired and frustrated. We'd driven 300 miles for nothing, and when Silva pointed at the drone and said, "You think they're recording?" Something snapped. I got out and started talking. Hey, StageHoloLive, you want content? Here's your content. I talked for nearly 10 minutes about the 2020, about the kids playing basements and barns, about the company trying to erase all of it, replacing live music with holograms, recruiting talent, and then shutting down the venues where that talent learned to play. We're still out here. We're still playing music in real life. Come find us. Then police lights flashed at the parking lot's edge, and we piled back into Daisy. The video went viral. I didn't know that at the time we were in Arkansas by morning, sleeping at a rest stop. But Marcia had a phone, and somewhere around Little Rock she started laughing. You're famous. 3 million views. The video was grainy, shot from the drone, but the audio was clear. I watched myself pace across the asphalt, voice cracking with exhaustion and fury. The comments called me by the same alias the kid in Pittsburgh had used. Not Luce Cannon, nobody remembered Luce Cannon. Harriet speaks truth. Harriet is what we need. I handed the phone back. I didn't mean for that to happen. Does it matter? People are listening. The mugging and the message. Rosemary got mugged on a Thursday. Walking home from a show, 2 men shoved her from behind. She hit the pavement, left hand jamming against concrete. By the time she registered the pain, her hoodie was gone, her cash was gone, and the men were running. Rosemary sat on the curb, cradling her swollen fingers, then walked to an all-night diner and asked the waitress to call the police. The officer was a woman named Celsor. She took Rosemary's statement, 2 men, dark clothing, no faces, and offered to drive her to the hospital. Rosemary declined, let the officer drive her home instead, sitting in the back seat like a suspect. She had no phone, no hoodie, no way to contact management, no way the system could track her. For the first time in years, she was utterly disconnected and completely free. Inside her apartment, she found her backup phone, the one she'd left, spoofing her location, and looked at it for a long time. If she turned it on, SHL would know she'd been lying. If she didn't, she couldn't call for help. She pried the data chip out and snapped it in half, wiped her fingerprints off the screen with a tissue, then smashed the phone with her heel until it was plastic shards and shattered glass. She swept the pieces into a dumpster bag. Back inside, she taped her injured pinky to her ring finger with masking tape and sat on the floor, breathing. She was non-com now. No hoodie, no phone, no data trail, invisible. They arrested her anyway, not for the mugging. That case went nowhere, but for the warehouse show. Someone had tipped off the police. The controlled burn shed set up herself. The empty warehouse shed filed with SHL. Her name was on the paperwork. StageHoloLive event coordinator. Responsible party. She spent the night in a holding cell, taped fingers throbbing, waiting for morning. The arraignment was brief. Misdemeanor congregation violation, fine plus court costs. She paid it with the last of her personal savings. Then she walked to the public library and checked her messages. That was when she saw the video. Luce shouting at the sky in the Graceland parking lot. 3 million views. The comments were a wall of the same alias stickers and heart emojis. Rosemary watched it 3 times. Then she walked outside and stood on the library steps, blinking in the afternoon sun. Luce was still out there, still playing, still fighting, still refusing to let the machine win. And Rosemary was here in Asheville, setting fires the corporation couldn't see, building a resistance one controlled burn at a time. She didn't have Jonah's forgiveness or Luce's trust. But she had a purpose. And she had a phone number found through the underground network, requested through an intermediary wad vouched for her despite everything. She called Joni. The phone rang 6 times. 7. 8. Then Jonas's voice, wary and sharp. "Who is this?" "It's Rosemary. Please don't hang up." A long pause. The clatter of dishes in the background. Joni was at work. "What do you want?" "I want to apologize. For Baltimore. For everything." Her voice cracked. "I know you won't forgive me, but I'm trying to fix it. I've been setting up fake venues for SHL to raid. Controlled burns. I send them to empty warehouses so the real shows can keep going. It's not enough. I know it's not enough, but it's something." Silence. Then, "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want to help Luce. Have you seen the video from Graceland?" "Everyone's seen the video. I want to give her a platform, a StageHoloLive show, but on her terms. Live audience. Real venue, no isolation booths. Use the company's own machinery to amplify what she's saying. But I need to reach her." And I smashed my phone. Joni laughed, not warmly, not coldly. Something in between. "You smashed your phone." Non-com. A sigh. "I have a lawyer friend who knows Marcia. Marcia's playing drums for Luce now. I can get a message through, but I'm not promising anything." "Luce doesn't trust you." "I don't trust you, I know. Thank you. Don't thank me yet." Jonas's voice softened slightly. "Rosemary, be careful. SHL doesn't forgive, and they don't forget." The line went dead. Rosemary stood in the library parking lot, phone pressed to her ear, listening to the silence. Then she started walking. She had a bus to catch, a plan to set in motion. And somewhere out there, on a highway she couldn't see, Luce was playing music in a diesel van, and the world was starting to listen. Episode 5, Manifest Independence. The ocean was not what Rosemary expected. She had seen it in veneers. Of course, glassy waves, sunset gradients, perfect shells arranged on perfect sand. The real Atlantic was gray and loud, the wind whipping foam off the crests, the beach scattered with broken shells and driftwood, and one decomposing horseshoe crab whose tail had snapped off. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. She had come to Carolina Beach because she needed somewhere to think, and because her bail conditions restricted her to North Carolina, and because Luce had finally sent her a message. The message had arrived 3 days after the barn show in Tennessee, where Rosemary had walked through a cow pasture in the rain, found Luce after her set and made her pitch. One StageHoloLive show on Luce's terms, using the company's own machinery to amplify a message that millions needed to hear. Luce had refused, called her naive, and walked away. Rosemary had spent the night shivering in a dairy barn, convinced she had failed. Then the text came. 5 words. No greeting, no signature, from a number Rosemary did not recognize but knew immediately anyway. "Fine, 1 show, your terms." Now she sat on a bench facing the Atlantic, her injured ankle propped on her bag, her taped pinky stiff in the cold, listening to a song on her new phone. The song was called Manifest Independence, and Luce had sent it with a message. It was raw and unpolished, recorded in what sounded like a van or a basement, and it was not for sale anywhere. It was not in the StageHoloLive catalog or the Super Wally database or any streaming platform she could access. It existed only on her phone, in this moment, with the salt wind cutting through her jacket and the waves collapsing against the shore. This song built slowly, a single guitar line, then Luce's voice, then drums and bass kicking in at the chorus. The lyrics were a call to action, a declaration of refusal, A list of things worth fighting for. Any note can be played over any chord, Luce sang, and Rosemary understood it was not just a musical principle, it was a philosophy, a way of life. She listened to the song 4 times in a row, then stood up and brushed the sand from her jeans. She had a meeting to schedule. The terms. The StageHoloLive campus had not changed. The same glass buildings, the same manicured paths, the same isolation booths humming on the soundstage. But Rosemary walked through it differently now. She was not a trainee anymore, not a nervous new hire trying to prove herself. She was a recruiter with results. Josh D'Souza, the Simrats, 2 controlled burns that had gone off without a hitch, and she had something management wanted. The silver mask materialized in her hoodie's hood space at the appointed time. No name, no face, just a smooth reflective surface and a voice calibrated to neutrality. You requested an in-person meeting, Moody. That is unusual. I have an unusual opportunity. Rosemary stood in the empty conference room, her hands steady at her sides. Luce Cannon is willing to do a single StageHoloLive concert. A pause. The mask did not move, but Rosemary had learned to read the silences. This silence was hungry. Luce Cannon has declined all previous offers. She'll do one show. On her terms. Terms are negotiated, not these. Rosemary recited the list she had memorized on the bus from the beach. First, a live audience in a real venue, not the campus soundstage. Not isolation booths. A theater with a stage and seats and people breathing the same air. That is irregular. Second, Luce chooses the set list. No required songs, no closing with a hit she doesn't want to play. Full creative control. The mask flickered slightly. Rosemary pressed on. Third, she can link to her own website during the show. No redirects to SHL properties. If people want to follow her after the concert, they follow her, not you. This was the dangerous one. Every SHL show funneled viewers into the company's ecosystem: purchase links, subscription prompts, algorithmically generated suggestions. Letting Luce point viewers elsewhere was a direct threat to the business model. Those terms are unacceptable, the mask said. Then there's no show. Rosemary took a breath. And no show means no access to her viral audience on your platform. No new subscribers from the Graceland video's 3 million viewers. Your competitors will pick her up eventually. Somebody will. Another silence, longer this time. Why is she agreeing to this? Because I convinced her, and because she has something to say. We would require approval of the set list. You can see the songs, you can't change them. We would require a cross-promotional link to the StageHoloLive catalog. You can have a link in the video description. She keeps her own site in the show. The mask tilted. Rosemary had never seen management display anything resembling a human gesture before. It was unsettling. The venue. She has chosen one? Yes. Rosemary had saved this for last, because it was the detail that would either sell the show or kill it. The Peach Theater, in the city where she played her last concert before. She watched the mask process this. The Peach was a ruin, no seats, peeling paint, a marquee with missing letters. But it was also a symbol, the last place Luce had played for a real audience before the stadium tragedy, before the bomb threats, before live music became illegal. Putting that name in the promotional material would generate exactly the kind of nostalgia-driven engagement SHL loved. The Peach is structurally compromised, the mask said. Then fix it. You have resources. Put up folding chairs. Run power from a generator. The cameras don't need the whole building, just the stage and the audience. The audience. How many? Shall play for 20. However you want to select them, contest winners, subscribers, whatever. But they have to be real people in real seats, not holograms and not hoodies. The mask held its position. Rosemary could feel her heartbeat in her taped finger. We will consider the terms, management said. You will have an answer within 48 hours. That's fine, but Luce won't negotiate further. These are the conditions, yes or no. The mask vanished. Rosemary stood alone in the conference room, the silence ringing in her ears. She had just demanded concessions no SHL recruiter had ever asked for. If management said no, she would have nothing. If they said yes, she would have to deliver a show that could change everything or destroy what was left of her career. She took the bus back to Asheville and waited. The Marquis. The bus dropped us off 3 blocks from the Peach because the road was closed. Silva and Marcia and I walked the rest of the way, our cases bumping against our legs. the January wind cutting down the empty streets. I had not been back here since the night the stadium bombs went off. I had not been back since before curfews and congregation laws and the slow erasure of every place where music had once been loud and public and real. The marquee was the first thing I saw, and it stopped me cold. ONIGHT LUCECANNON. The letters were the same ones I had photographed that night, the night I added name on a marquee to my mental list of impossible things I had somehow achieved. They had survived years of weather and neglect, the C and H of THEPEACH gone, leaving THEPEA, which Silva found unreasonably funny. The bulbs around the sign were mostly shattered. Grackles had nested in the remaining letters. "Oh man," Silva said, staring up at it. He had worked here once, had been the sound engineer on that last night, had read our tech rider when nobody else bothered, had stepped in on bass when JD walked out. He had probably been the one who never changed the sign after everything fell apart. "You okay?" Marcia asked me. "I don't know yet. The inside was worse. The lobby had been stripped ticket, booth gone, concession stand gutted, the red carpet reduced to a stained runner. The auditorium doors hung open. I walked through them and stopped again. The seats were gone. All of them. The orchestra level was a bare concrete slope, the balcony a ledge of exposed wood. The paint on the proscenium arch was peeling in long strips, revealing older paint beneath, but the stage was still there. The acoustics, I could tell even from the back of the room, were still there. The bones of the place were intact. "They put the chairs in," Rosemary said from behind me. I turned. She was standing in the lobby doorway, holding a tablet, her posture tense. She looked tired, there were shadows under her eyes, and her left pinky was taped to her ring finger. 20 chairs, she said. Folding. Right in front of the stage. The camera array goes in tonight. 20 people, I said. Contest winners. Selected by SHL. And the rest? She met my eyes and said nothing, but something flickered there. I did not ask again. Silva and Marcia were already on stage, testing the power, running cables. Marcia's hi-hat caught the light from the work lamps, a clean silver disc in all that ruin. I walked up the stage stairs, familiar, solid, the same stairs I had climbed that night with April and Hewitt and a new song we had not finished writing. Blood and Diamonds. SHL wanted me to close with it. The memo had arrived that morning, phrased as a suggestion but weighted like a requirement. Your signature song is the natural finale. I had not told Rosemary yet that I was planning to drop it. The sound check was short and clean. The room, even gutted, even empty, sounded better than it had any right to. Silva moved between the stage and the board, adjusting levels, his face set in the expression he got when things were working right and he did not want to jinx it. Marcia ran through fills, the drum sound bouncing off bare walls and coming back sharp. 1 hour, Rosemary called from the floor. Doors in 30 minutes. 20 people, 20 contest winners who had entered an SHL promotion, who might or might not know who I was, who might or might not care. I had played for fewer. The barn show in Tennessee had drawn a dozen, and half of them were there for the jam session afterward, but the empty seats bothered me more than no seats at all. 20 chairs in a room built for hundreds. This is not a conjuring, I said aloud. What? Marcia looked up from her snare. Nothing. Old habit. A conjuring, that was what I had always called it when the room filled and the audience became something collective and alive. I had told myself I did not need that tonight. This was an obligation, a favor, a tactical strike. The music was a delivery mechanism for a message. That was all. I was lying to myself, and I knew it. Rosemary appeared at the edge of the stage. Your shirt, the one you mentioned. I pulled it from my bag. Black cotton, white lettering. On the front, is this real? On the back, this is not real. I had silk screened it myself at a rest stop in Georgia, using stencils I cut from cardboard. Marcia said it was the most on-the-nose thing I had ever done. She was not wrong. 10 minutes, Rosemary said. The winners are in the lobby. How do they look? Confused, excited. Some of them are wearing your old band shirts. I pulled the shirt over my head. Is this real? The answer was about to get complicated. The show, 20 faces in 20 folding chairs. That was the audience. A handful of SHL camera operators at the back. Rosemary standing in the wings, tablet in hand, ready to relay whatever messages the director in Hoodspace was sending. The lights went down. The stage lights, makeshift, rented, hot, came up. I walked to the microphone and looked out at the 20 strangers who had won a contest and did not know they were about to become part of something larger than a comeback concert. Luce Cannon, I said. Some of you know me from a video that's been going around. I don't care what you call me. Thank you for being here. Silva hit the first bass note. Lock. Marcia counted us in. The first song was one of mine, an older one, something from the Blood and Diamonds catalog that I had not played in years. The 20 people clapped politely. The cameras recorded. Somewhere in hood space, SHL subscribers watched through their veneers. The show fed to them as a holographic performance, a comeback special, a piece of content. The second song was new. I had written it in the van, somewhere between Arkansas and Oklahoma, watching the flatlands scroll past the window. It was about leaving and arriving and the space in between. It was about a person I had watched through a window, standing on my doorstep, not answering when I knocked. The crowd, the 20 of them, leaned forward slightly. Something was shifting in the room. That was when I heard the doors. The Peach had side entrances, emergency exits, doors that had not been used in years but still swung open if you pushed hard enough. Rosemary had unlocked them, I realized. Rosemary had unlocked all of them, and now people were coming through quietly, quickly, filling the back of the auditorium, filling the bare concrete slope where the seats used to be. They did not make noise. They did not call out. They entered the way people enter a space they are not supposed to be in, grateful and silent and electric with the knowledge that they are getting away with something. It kept singing. The song carried me forward. Marcia's drumming picked up, responding to the change in the room, the way the sound was suddenly hitting more bodies, coming back warmer. Silva grinned behind his bass. He had known. Of course he had known. By the third song, the room was half full. By the fourth, it was packed. People standing shoulder to shoulder on the concrete, people lining the balcony, people pressed against the walls. The 20 chairs were still there, a tiny island of SHL-approved winners, but around them a sea of real bodies had materialized, and the energy in the room was not a contest anymore. It was a conjuring. I caught Rosemary's eye from the stage. She was watching the crowd with an expression I could not name. Triumph and terror, relief and fear, all folded together. Her taped pinky was pressed against her tablet. She had done this. She had invited a real audience to an SHL show using the company's own guest code system, distributing free access through channels the algorithm could not track. The director's voice crackled in my monitor. We're seeing unexpected viewer demographics, much higher first-time traffic than projected. Continue as planned. They did not know. The people watching in hood space thought they were seeing a normal concert, a comeback show with a standard audience. The camera operators knew something was off. They kept glancing at the doors, but the feed was going out live, and there was no way to stop it without cutting the broadcast. I finished the fourth song and stepped back from the mic. My hands were shaking, my heart was pounding, and somewhere in my chest a decision crystallized that had been forming since the barn in Tennessee, since Graceland, since the night I wrote a song in glow paint behind a hotel dresser. This was not an obligation anymore. This was a show, a real one. I pulled out my monitors, the earpieces came free, the wires dangling against my shirt. Is this real? And suddenly the director's voice was gone. The only sound was the room, the crowd, the hum of amplifiers. I had 16 bars of band intro before the next song was supposed to start, and I used every one of them to walk to the front of the stage and look at the people who had come. I want to tell you about a place called the 2020, I said. The crowd went quiet. It was a basement in Baltimore. We put on shows there because we were not allowed to put them on anywhere else. We played for whoever showed up, 50 people, 100, sometimes 12. It did not matter. What mattered was that we were together in the same room, breathing the same air, hearing the same sound at the same moment. The desiccation revives helping. That is something you cannot get through a hoodie. That is something a hologram cannot fake. The SHL camera operators were panicking. I could see them at the edge of my vision, gesturing at each other. The director was probably screaming into a dead channel. The broadcast was still running. They could not cut it without admitting something had gone wrong. StageHoloLive wants you to believe that live music is dangerous. End quote. Shalinton. They want you to stay home, put on your hoodies, and pay for a veneer of a band that played together once in isolation booths on a soundstage they never left. They want you to forget what it feels like to be in a room with 100 strangers who are not strangers for the duration of a song. I was shouting now. I had not planned to shout. My voice was cracking the way it had cracked in the Graceland parking lot, raw and furious and completely beyond my control. But we are still here, we are still playing, and we are not going to stop. Marcia hit the snare. Silva's bass rumbled through the floor. I grabbed my guitar and stepped to the mic and launched into Manifest Independence. The song was not finished. I had written it in pieces, on napkins and motel stationery, and the back of an atlas page, and I was still not sure the bridge worked or the final verse landed. But it did not matter. The crowd knew the chorus "Any note can be played over any chord," and they sang it back at me. 300 people who had come through unlocked doors for a show they were not supposed to see. The first string broke during the second verse. I kept playing. The second string broke during the bridge. I kept playing, my fingers bleeding against the fretboard. The guitar reduced to a percussive shell that I beat with my palm while Marcia carried the rhythm and Silva's bass held the center. The last chord rang out a single note, a bent note, a note that was still working for me, and then it was over. The house lights came up, the room was full of people, blinking in the sudden brightness, and for one frozen moment nobody moved. Then, as if on a signal I had not given, they began to leave quietly, quickly, the way they had entered, through the unlocked doors and back into the night. The SHL camera operators were shouting into their headsets. The 20 contest winners were on their feet, applauding, apparently delighted by whatever they thought had just happened. Rosemary was standing in the wings, her tablet dangling from her hand, her face wet with tears. I put down my guitar. My cuticles were bleeding. I did not feel it. Well, Silva said, that was a show. The footbridge. The Peach emptied out faster than I had expected. The cameras were packed and loaded into vans. The 20 winners were escorted to their buses, still buzzing with the excitement of having seen something they could not quite explain. The SHL staff technicians, coordinators, a manager who materialized in hood space and shouted at Rosemary for 11 minutes before she muted him, vanished into the logistics of cleanup. Rosemary found me outside, sitting on the theater steps, wrapping my bleeding fingers in a strip torn from my shirt. The marquee still said my name, the grackles still nested in the letters, and the cold January air was the cleanest thing I had breathed in months. "They're calling it a technical glitch," she said. "An unauthorized audience entered due to a security oversight. The broadcast reached 4 times the projected viewers. They're not sure whether to fire me or promote me." "Did you get what you needed?" She sat down on the step beside me. "The free guest code. I created it and distributed it anonymously. They could trace it to me if they tried, but right now they're too busy spinning the story. They're calling it a success. The engagement numbers were off the charts." We sat in silence for a moment. The street was empty. The buildings across from the theater were dark. In a few hours, the sun would come up and someone would probably arrest me for congregation violations, and the video of my speech would be edited out of the official SHL recording, but it did not matter. The broadcast had gone out live. 3 million people had seen the Graceland rant. 4 times that had seen the Peach show. You could not put the words back in the bottle. Rosemary walked beside me in silence for half a block. Then, "I'm sorry," she said. "You already apologized. At the barn. I didn't finish." She turned to look at me. "I'm sorry for the 2020. I'm sorry for the metadata. I'm sorry for being too naive to understand what I was doing when I took the job, but I'm not sorry for tonight. Tonight was the first thing I've done that felt like it mattered." I looked at my bandaged fingers. The blood was starting to soak through the fabric. "You know they'll come for you," I said. "If they figure out you engineered this, you'll lose the job. You'll lose the debt protection. You'll be worse than non-com. You'll be marked." "I know. Was it worth it?" She considered the question the way she considered everything carefully, methodically, like a technician diagnosing a system error. Then she nodded. "Yes. It was worth it the moment the doors opened." I stood up. My legs were unsteady, exhaustion, adrenaline, the afterburn of a show that had taken everything I had. "Walk with me," I said. We went down the street to the footbridge that crossed the old canal, the one I used to walk across before, after shows, to clear my head before the bus ride home. The water was low and dark, reflecting the streetlights in broken ribbons. We stopped at the midpoint and leaned on the railing. "I'm going back on tour," I said. "Silva and Marcia and me. Cast as fire. We're going to keep playing wherever people will have us. Basements, barns, warehouses, anywhere. Tonight bought us visibility, but visibility isn't sustainability. I need someone who can handle logistics so I can handle music." She was quiet. I need a tour manager, I said. Someone who understands both systems, the underground and the corporate. Someone who can run controlled burns and negotiate with promoters and make sure we have power and a PA and an unlocked exit. Someone who can stand in a crowd without panicking. The last words landed softly. Rosemary's hands tightened on the railing. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you a way out. SHL will use you until you're useless, and then they'll discard you. Come work for me instead. It won't pay as well. It won't be safe. You'll spend a lot of nights sleeping in a van and a lot of mornings wondering if the police are going to shut down the venue before we can play. But the work will matter. Every show will matter. Rosemary looked down at the dark water. The wind moved her hair across her face. She did not brush it away. I don't know if I can do it, she said. The crowds, the noise. I still get panic attacks. I still feel like I can't breathe when too many people are too close. I know, you get through them anyway. You've been getting through them since the first night you walked into the 2020. That was different. I had you. You'll still have me, and Marcia, and Silva. You'll have a band, which is a kind of family, if you want it to be. She did not answer. The silence stretched out, filled by the sound of water and distant traffic and the occasional cry of a gull over the canal. I did not push. The offer was made. The choice was hers. We stood there for a long time, two women on a footbridge in the middle of the night, the Marquis of the Peach still glowing faintly behind us, her name still up there in the cold, and the city quiet around us, and the future open in both directions. "I'll think about it," Rosemary said finally. "That's all I'm asking." She turned away from the railing and looked at me, and for a moment, just a moment, her expression was not guarded or anxious or calculating. It was something simpler, something that looked like hope. "Thank you," she said, "for the show, for the chance." "Thank you for the audience," I said. "I couldn't have done that part without you." She smiled, then a real smile, the first one I had seen from her since the night we stayed up talking in my kitchen, her head bandaged from the fence fall, my hands wrapped around a coffee mug. It felt like a different life. It felt like the same life continuing. We walked back to the theater together. The equipment vans were pulling away. Silva and Marcia were loading the last of the gear into Daisy, the diesel van idling at the curb. Marcia looked up and waved. "Everything okay?" she called. "Fine," I said, "just making a pitch." She looked at Rosemary, then at me, and something passed across her face, understanding maybe, or the beginning of it. "Get in the van, both of you. We've got a 7-hour drive to the next show, and I'm not doing it on an empty stomach." Rosemary hesitated at the van door. I could see the calculation running behind her eyes, the debt, the contract, the bail conditions, the life she had built, and the life she might build instead. I did not press her again. She would decide when she was ready. She climbed into the van, the door closed. Silva put Daisy in gear. We pulled away from the curb, past the marquee, past the dark storefronts and the empty streets, heading toward the highway and whatever came next. In the back seat, Rosemary was looking out the window at the city lights, her taped pinky resting in her lap. She had not said yes. She had not said no. She was here, for now, and that was enough. Any note can be played over any chord. She stands on the footbridge. She does not say yes. She does not say no. She holds the question. That's where we left Rosemary Laws, and that's where Sarah Pinsker leaves us, at the point where discovery turns into decision, and no one can make it for you. Here's what you should know about the person who wrote that ending. Sarah Pinsker is a working musician. She has spent decades in vans and basements and clubs with bad sound systems and worse heating. She has played the kinds of venues this book maps so carefully, the ones with a single bathroom, a broken PA, a door person who reads your face before deciding whether you get in. She didn't research this world. She has bruises from it. When Pinsker calls the novel a love letter to punk spaces and the DIY music scene, she's describing a practice. The 2020 exists. Not at 2020 North Avenue in Baltimore, that's fiction, but in 100 basements and back rooms across every city that has ever had musicians too stubborn to stop playing. The book is not imagining a future where live music has to hide. It's documenting a present where live music already hides, already scrapes by on $10 cover charges and word of mouth and the belief that being in a room together still matters more than convenience ever could. This is why Rosemary's discovery matters. She doesn't walk into an allegory, she walks into something real, something Pinsker has spent her adult life inside of, and the book's achievement is making you feel that discovery from the inside, through the panic attack, through the kiss, through the white flash when a head hits packed dirt. The novel came out in 2019, which means Pinsker wrote it before anyone had heard of social distancing. But that timing is not what makes the book durable. What makes it durable is that it was never really about prediction. It was about transmission, a working musician saying, with the tools of fiction, this is what we do, this is what it costs, this is why we keep doing it. So when you think about Rosemary on that footbridge, think about what she's holding. Not a job offer, not a redemption arc, a practice, a way of being in the world that costs something real: safety, stability, the clean simplicity of a life lived through screens, and gives back something realer. The question is never whether the music is worth it. The question is whether you are willing to be the kind of person who says yes. The song keeps going. Another one begins. And somewhere, right now, in a room you might walk past without noticing, someone is tuning a guitar and unlocking